Man, oh man, teams with no shot in 2025. I hope they don't name your team in 2025 for not having a shot. We'll talk about that today on Locked On NFL.
The barbershop is open and Tony Wiggins has a chair for you. He's ready with some real NFL talk. The local experts of Locked On bring their expertise, and Wiggy is ready with his clippers and shears. Sit down and enjoy. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
She's right. It is your team every day here on Locked On NFL. We thank you for making us your first listen. And I'm going to remind you, man, wherever you get your podcast, make sure you tap into that location each and every day so you do not miss an episode. That is whether you watch them or listen to them. It does not matter. We'll be there because that's what we do. We are there every single day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Shout out to the Everydayers for joining us every day. And just like normally, every Friday, I have Matt Williamson, former NFL scout, also still covers the Pittsburgh Steelers, and one of the founders of Locked On NFL. Always welcome Matt in, and we're going to talk a little ball today. In the third segment, we'll end the show talking about T. Higgins and his tag and how does it affect the NFL draft, or how is his perception affected by the wide receivers in the NFL draft. Also, a little bit of back and forth. We'll look at Justin Herbert along with some AFC South quarterbacks that need to make a turnaround this season. The NFL Combine, my man Matt is going to the Combine. We'll find out who our squad show guys think is the best player without consideration of position and any of that stuff, and then get Matt's opinion on some things that he's going to be looking for up at the Combine. And then at the very beginning, which is right now, we are not going to bury the lead. We are going to talk about teams with no shot in 2025. I want you to know that all the clips you get today are from the squad show, because I want y'all to understand exactly what these shows are about and how much work goes into them. So you can go over there and tap in every time that there is a Locked On NFL squad show, which is every single week. David Harrison, by the way, who hosts with me on Wednesday, is the lead on that, along with Cody Rourke. So it's always a bunch of fun. And I'm going to show you just how much today. Matt, man, look, teams with no shot in 2025. We never know. You know, I don't get caught up into the offseason. Every fan base thinks that their team's going to win all their games, and everybody who's bad think they're going to get better, my team included in Jacksonville. Who do you think has no shot in 2025 right off the top of your head?
So I want to preface this, because if we did this show on opening day of 2024, if it was Friday leading up to the opening day, hadn't even snapped the ball yet, but we knew what all the teams were like, I would have the Washington Commanders on this list. So there is hope for some teams that look pretty bleak, you know, coming into the season. Now, hope and having no shot are two different things, though. Like, I look at like the Patriots and the Titans and the Raiders and think, okay, things are trending up with these teams. Like, I don't think they can win the Super Bowl, and I don't think they have a shot, but at least the fan bases have things to get excited about. We got the first overall pick. We got Tom Brady involved. We got May as our quarterback. But there's two franchises to me, Wig, that just, I don't understand what they're doing. I think that they're not self-recognizing their mistakes of the past.
I want you to name one of them first, because I got a feeling you're going to name one that's on this, that these guys are talking about.
One's absolutely the Browns.
I mean, Go ahead. Tell me.
I mean, obviously the Watson trade is brutal. It's crippling. It's the worst trade that I'm aware of in sports history, certainly in NFL history. But even making matters worse is just look at their last three draft classes. I mean, like, their first pick is 54th overall. It's in the 60s the year before that. It's in the 70s the year before that. So they don't have any young, cheap labor or up and coming guys. Who are the foundational players? And Garrett, of course, wants out. And they keep kicking the can down the road. And I have to think that a couple of their stalwart type players, you know, Ward, Bitonio, Conklin, probably are going to want out too, or need to be out to make the cap work. I think Kirk Cousins is going to be their quarterback, which could be okay. Good. You know, I mean, that could be okay, but there's just no hope for the organization. Like, I think Myles Garrett did them a favor if they recognize it by saying, trade me, because then they could bottom out and finally build through picks. They have the most draft capital of any team in the league, but they're looking at it like they're still in it to win it. And I don't understand that at all.
I want you to stop right there because great minds think alike. Listen to what the guys on the squad show said to echo your opinion.
Yeah, first of all, I love that pick from Keith. Obviously, when I flush the toilet, it sounds like it's saying Raiders, so I absolutely love that. I'll go with the I'll go with the Cleveland Browns. I think that's the lowest hanging fruit on this list, arguably the worst offseason scenario that I've ever seen with what they have going on. Their best player doesn't want to be there. Their quarterback that they invested, 3 draft classes plus $230 million guaranteed in is not working out. So I think that's probably the lowest hanging fruit out of the teams that definitely won't be competing, even though they just won 11 games in 2023.
All right, so we gave it away a little bit, what they also thought. So I'm going to go ahead and ask you right now, who's your second team?
The New Orleans Saints.
Oh, it's not the other team. Okay. There you go.
That's another one. I mean, who are the young players you're excited about? I mean, maybe Fuaga, last year's first-round pick. Olave, but he's getting close to contract time and has tons of concussions. Like, I've seen enough. I love the Honey Badger and Demario Davis and Cameron Jordan and Kamara and these great Saints players, all-time great Saints. But, man, they just keep doing the same things too. I mean, insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results, and they just keep kicking the can down the road. And I don't know if you're aware of Jason from OTC. He's the over-the-cap guy, and I just threw it out there on Twitter and I tagged him. I said, I'm not a cap expert, Jason, but is the Saints cap situation worse or the Browns? And he just wrote back, the Saints times 1,000. I'm like, we just talked about how bad the Browns are. I mean, the Saints they can't restructure anybody. I mean, I just don't know where to start there.
Yeah, I jokingly called them the Evans family from Good Times because I said they're not financial wizards, they're just survivors. And that's what they seem to do every year. Even with the cap help that came from the NFL, I'm still going to sit here and get me some popcorn when they start trimming it to figure out how they're going to do it. And they have been experts at figuring it out. Real quick, after we hear this, I'm going to come back and tell you why I do believe the team that was mentioned on the squad show, this one team, I don't think it's as bad as people think, and I'll give you my opinion, but I'll let you hear them first.
Every team is 0-0. Everybody's tied for first place, but there's just some teams out there that just don't have a chance for one reason or another. And I actually want to start with Keith. I want to start with Locked On NFL Draft, Keith, because a lot of draft talk also centers around team building and how well teams draft and how well teams build these things. There's a lot of options here, man. I mean, the league as well, but like Jets, Pats, Browns, Jags, Titans, Raiders, Giants, Patricia, Cowboys, Saints, Bears, Cardinals, 49ers, maybe. Which team has zero chance of rebounding in 2025?
Yeah, I look at the teams that need quarterbacks that are right outside of the quarterback range, right? So if you're picking outside of the top 3 or 4, you're probably in trouble. So I look probably at the Raiders. I think the Raiders have no shot as currently constructed right now because they're outside of that top, 3 to 5 range, right? They need quarterback help. There's a lot of holes on this team, period. So that's one team. I see the Broncos cheering over there. So AFC West, that's one less opponent that you have to worry about. I look at the Raiders as a team that I view doesn't have a shot as now currently constructed.
So not having a shot to win and hope. I'm glad you said that they're two different things. And here's my opinion on that. I agree. All 3 teams y'all mentioned have no shot to win this year. Yeah. But the Raiders are the one, in my opinion, that are already where you said Myles Garrett gives Cleveland a chance to be if they make a trade. And where that is they've already been diagnosed. They've already come out of ICU, right? They're back in their room, got a long road to recovery, but they got Dr. Pete Carroll, and he has already told them exactly what's wrong. They did hit on their draft pick with Brock Bowers, who I think is already a top 4 tight end in the league. They do have a good pass rusher who wants to be there. They do have a couple of young pieces on the offensive line. Yeah, they need to fix quarterback, but at least they've already been diagnosed. They've had their surgery. They're out of ICU, and their heart is beating again.
That's the way to look at it. I mean, the tough times, I think, are behind them finally, and I think Brady has something to do with that. Carroll has something to do with that. I like the coordinator hires. They did have a good draft class. That's step one, and I do agree with Keith. They're a distant fourth in the AFC West as currently constructed. So they do have no chance. But for the first time in a while, if I was a Raiders fan, I'd be like, okay, I see the direction. There might be light at this end of this very dark tunnel. And Wig, the last thing I want to throw out there too, both New York teams, I don't know if their owners can win.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, I forgot about them. I don't know how. I don't know how I could. I feel like Fred Sanford Elizabeth. I'm coming to join you. I don't know how we forgot about both of those teams in New York because they are also still on life support. I will say this: I think Aaron Glenn's going to be all right, and because of his mental toughness and the way that he's played there. And Aaron Glenn ain't got time for that foolishness, man. He'll tell the media in a minute, "Hey, just chill out. I know what I'm doing." And the Giants are a whole different thing. There's actually a segment on there, too, where they asked Patricia about the Giants. They asked her what would Dabo have to do to save his job. She said win, period. Point blank, end of discussion. And that's going to be very hard to do in the NFC East. Look, we got the Combine coming up, and we're going to discuss that and more. My man Matt's going to be up there. First, I'm going to find out, though, I'll tell you what. I'll give you that in the second segment. We'll do that in just a second here on Locked On NFL. All right, today's show is sponsored and brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off, or we want to be on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into same game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting, whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three. I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, rolling along here with Matt Williamson. Matt is always our Friday guest here on Locked On NFL, a recurring guest. So he's like family. Family will be traveling to Indy to the Combine, and yeah, I'm jealous because I got surgery coming up, so I got to be home. But a lot of people are going up there looking for something. They're either trying to validate the way they already feel about certain players or just surprise me. Who's going to jump out and surprise me? So before I get Matt to tell me some of the things that he's looking for and some of the position group strengths that are in the Combine from a scouting perspective, I saw this clip on the Scout Show last night where they asked, just without all of the positional value, without this, without that, who do you think is the best player? And they asked Keith Sanchez, one of the hosts of the Locked On NFL draft shows, and listen to what he said.
If we're talking NFL draft, we got to go to Keith Sanchez, Locked On NFL Draft, the expert here. Keith, that's kind of the question, and I know everybody's got a little bit of a different way of measuring this, but to you, who to you is the best pound-for-pound player in this year's NFL draft?
So best player, I'm gonna go Abdul Carter. And the reason is that everybody compares this guy to Micah Parsons, but I will take it one step further. I think he's actually a better stack linebacker than what Micah Parsons is. I think Abdul Carter has all pro potential as an edge rusher, and I think he has Pro Bowl level caliber if you just wanted to put him at stack linebacker. So I think so many different coordinators are going to look at him and say that this guy is a true versatile front seven piece, right? And he can do it all. And I think we've learned this year, right, especially with the run game coming back, is that linebackers are back in high priority. You need linebackers to be able to fill gaps. So I think that's why you even elevate his stock just a little bit more. But you're talking about a guy that I'm willing to go all in and I really like is Abdul Carter.
Late to that party, but I'm with him. A lot of Jaguar fans told me when they were picking 5 that they would take Abdul Carter, even though they have Trayvon Walker as well as Josh Allen. I said you can't do it because you got all these other needs, and you got 2 pretty good edge rushers, and you basically run an even front. once Keith said he could play off ball and he's better at it than Micah Parsons, I was sold. What's your opinion on Abdul Carter?
I like him a lot. So I'm not super impressed with the top of this draft, to be honest with you. I mean, the term blue chip gets thrown around, and usually there's 4 or 5 of them. I think this group of blue chippers is lesser than most years. And I also think that group, every year there's like a dozen to 18 first round picks, no matter what year they come out. And I'm not as impressed with that group as usual. I like Carter a lot. I've watched them, Penn State's on here every Saturday all the time too. And I mean, there's a lot of Penn State fans around. He's super explosive. The off the ball stuff is interesting. He wore 11 at Penn State, so there are Parsons comparisons. Parsons is nastier though, and his lateral agility and his strength is much better. And now we're comparing him to one of the best players in the league. Like, I hate player comparisons because people are like, "Oh, who's he remind you of?" "Oh, Jim Brown, Jerry Rice." Chill. One thing that worries me about Carter though is strength. There's times where he whips a tackle, and a tackle will just shove his shoulder, and he ends up on the ground. He's on the ground a lot. And I don't know that most years he would be the number 1 pass rusher. He's a top 5 pick every year, but I don't think he's Myles Garrett. I don't think he's Nick Bosa, when they came out of school.
Yeah, I'm the same way, and that's why I was a little bit late on him. And a lot of times what happens is, who the best prospect is, like I always tell people, if you look up the word prospect, it says there's a couple of words in there. It says most likely to be successful or most likely. So that's what it is. It doesn't mean they're going to play well or be the best, because you don't know where they're going, right? So if I looked up one day 3 years from now, and the best player from this draft is Dylan Sampson, a speedy, fast running back from Tennessee, I wouldn't be shocked, and he's a 3rd round pick. I wouldn't be shocked if somebody uses him the same way that Detroit uses Jahmyr Gibbs, and everybody's sitting there looking with their eyes going, damn. I remember when DeAndre Hopkins got picked at the end of the 2013 draft, and everybody said, well, this draft was terrible. Well, DeAndre Hopkins might be a first ballot Hall of Famer. If not first ballot, he'll get there. And Lane Johnson was sitting right there at the top of the draft, and he's going to Canton. So it's like, got to be careful with the differences between a prospect and the difference between the prospect and who's going to have the best career. It doesn't always match up. In fact, I'll tell you, it doesn't match up a whole bunch. But with the position groups, you say you don't like the top of the draft. That doesn't mean that there's not depth at some positions. Yeah. Is there a position, a certain position group you're looking forward to seeing when you go up to Indy?
Real quick, I just want to go backwards just one step. Like I'm always asked this every year, and I always do a show of who I think the best player is in every draft. And I guess it was 2 years ago. I knew they weren't going to be a top 5 pick, but my top 2 guys were Jalen Carter and Bijan Robinson.
Whoa.
Now, I knew they weren't going to go in the top 5, but they were the best 2 prospects, best 2 football players. And to me, in this class, it's pretty easy. It's Genty. Genty's the best football player in this class. To me,
yeah.
I mean, I know he's not going to go in top 5, but he's the best football player.
Right. So people understand this. Warren Sapp, one of the, I think, 6 first ballot defensive tackle Hall of Fame, one of only 6. Great career. They asked Warren Sapp, he was on a podcast or something a couple of years ago, of all of those Hall of Fame guys that were on the team, who was the best player? He said everybody was good. Our best pure football player was Derrick Brooks, who plays weak side linebacker, right? And people were like, really? He goes, our best pure football player was Derrick Brooks. And then there's somebody else he mentioned, and you have to really, really have a scout's eye. Not really. You could look at the stats. He boasted about Simeon Rice.
I bet he said Rice, yeah.
And he was one of those 5 guys on that team. He's the one that didn't make the Hall of Fame. You got a safety, you got a corner, you got Brooks, and you got Sapp. But he made sure that everybody knew who Simeon Rice was. And you look up, he's got 122 sacks, right? And that's what happens sometimes to players. They're better players than people think. He was picked behind his teammate, Kevin Hardy, who came here to Jacksonville. Simeon Rice had a better career than Kevin Hardy. So prospect and eventual performance are 2 different things, and it depends where they go. And another thing that aids them is winning. When you win a championship, people remember your impact more than they do if you put up a bunch of numbers and you don't have that impact. All right,
And Wade, you're old enough to remember when Sapp came out. He was like Jalen Carter. He had a red flag, like Randy Moss. Like Moss and Sapp were probably the best two players in their respective draft, but we knew they weren't going top 5 because of stuff.
Hey, man, look, I was right there. I thought Cleveland was going to take Sapp, and they took Derek Alexander, who's from high school that's about 10 miles from where I'm sitting now here in Jacksonville, and I could not believe that they didn't take him. I also, as much credit as I give Jimmy Johnson, I'll tell you, I don't always agree. The Dallas Cowboys had a chance to take Randy Moss. They moved back and took John Avery, the running back out of they needed speed. They took John Avery, running back out of Ole Miss. And someone quoted Jimmy and said, we went to his workout and we thought we were going to see James Lofton, and we didn't. That's one of the times I can really tell you Jimmy screwed up, because I cannot imagine Randy Moss catching passes from Dan Marino. It would have been unbelievable. All right, more talk here in the NFL. We're going to talk T. Higgins. We're going to take a moment to listen to Sarge, too. Sarge had a couple of things he wanted to say to Peter Bukowski. Peter always is like the dude I put that bullseye on. I was on the phone with him last night, but he takes it very well.
He does.
That's what happens in the barbershop, man. You got to be able to give it. You got to be able to take it. We'll talk more about that in just a second here on Locked On NFL. All right, so a lot of talk as we continue here with segment 3 on Locked On NFL. Lots of talk about the draft and the combine. Free agency actually comes first. The combine comes first, then NFL free agency, and then the draft. There are wide receiver needy teams that have to make business decisions. One of those teams that actually has a wide receiver that has to make a business decision is T. Higgins and the Cincinnati Bengals, and that is because their decision isn't just about T. Higgins. Their decision is also about keeping their quarterback happy, but keeping their other wide receiver happy, and they're going to have to give him about $8 million more than they give T. Higgins. They have already said they will place the franchise tag on him. There's a lot of discussion about whether or not they'll trade him. Listen to the guys from the NFL Squad show discuss T. Higgins.
Should the Cincinnati Bengals tag T. Higgins to keep him from leaving, or should they let him walk out the door?
They should not let him walk out the door. That is the first thing I will say. They absolutely should not do that. I mean, if it has to be the franchise tag, then I guess it has to be the franchise tag. But I just don't know what the future would hold for T if that were the case. I mean, would T play on it this year is the question, because with the Bengals, obviously there are questions about if they're going to pay some of their other guys. I know there are reports now coming out that Jamar Chase could get a $40 million plus per year payday, which he deserves. The Trey Hendrickson situation, Joe Burrow has been very clear that the Bengals cannot let these guys leave because, look, Joe Burrow's a great quarterback. I've seen that firsthand covering this Ravens team, but he cannot do it by himself. And part of what makes this Bengals team so good is the fact that if you throw everything at Jamar Chase, well, you still got to worry about T. Higgins on the other side of things. And we've seen one because T has been injured a little bit over the course of his career. When T's not in there, it takes the Bengals offense a couple gears down.
All right, so Matty, I sat and thought about teams that have to pay 2 wide receivers. Miami with Waddle and Cheetah, and it hasn't worked out, right? They used up, and they paid the quarterback. And then I thought about another team that did the same thing where it really hasn't worked, and that was the 49ers. They paid Debo, and then they had to pay Brandon Ayuk. And you see how that, and they ain't paid their quarterback yet. But then I remember that I cannot just use things to support my argument.
There's a good one out there.
A team just won a Super Bowl that paid both wide receivers and their quarterback and a running back and their offensive lineman. Now, they do have one thing that's different. They hit on all of their draft picks, and they always find offensive and defensive linemen, and the Bengals don't. So how do you feel about the Bengals and what they have to do?
The Eagles are the obviously the poster boys, but their ownership couldn't be any different than the Brown family. I mean, in terms of cash spending and, giving guys money up front and all that good stuff. But I think the Bengals have to keep Higgins. But let me go here. I think they need a tight end. I think they need 2 offensive linemen. And if they trade Hendrickson, which I think will happen if they keep Higgins, now they need 7 or 8 defensive starters. I mean, I'm not exaggerating.
No,
now,
you're right.
But there's a lot of guys they can cut. This new cap news helps them a lot, because they could, and they had the Brown family. I give them credit. Over the last 5-6 years, they've gone outside the organization and spent. I mean, they never did that for 30 years. I mean, they built a defense back when they were good a couple years ago. But I think you have to keep a strength. I think you have to keep your quarterback as lethal as possible. Even if you could, if you can have the best or one of the best passing games in the league and still going to be subpar on defense, I think that's where you start at least,
Yeah, you do have to. I tell you what, when you say they don't spend, and this is an inside the business thing, I have been told in their scouting department that they were for years, they were one of the cheapest and they wouldn't put anything into it. And that's one of the differences between them and a team like Pittsburgh and a team like Philadelphia, a team like Kansas City. Like they have a scout for almost everything, right? And they have checks and balances everywhere. So their this is my solution for them. Their pro personnel people have to earn their job, because where they're really going to make their money, and they have to listen to their area scouts, because where they're going to make their money is day 3. They got to find people on day 3. And then after free agency at the end of it, because they do have the quarterback and those weapons, I think it'll be easy for them to get Stephon Gilmore. I think it'll be easy for them to find them some guys like that. Old pluggers, but they can still get it done and try to blend them in a little bit. Let's have some fun, man. Let's have some fun talking about quarterbacks, young quarterbacks. All the talk is always about Trevor Lawrence because of the expectations. And I sometimes think that Trevor Lawrence gets treated a little bit differently than, say, C.J. Stroud. And it all has to do with expectations. 95% of the people thought Trevor Lawrence was going to be Andrew Luck, and about 50% of the people thought C.J. Stroud wasn't even going to be very good, right? They both have some recovering to do. But I'll tell you there's somebody else is going to be mentioned right here in the squad shows. They got a little bit something to prove too, and I think they kind of always get a pass. I'm going to play this clip, but y'all got to also get ready for the drive-by on none other than Peter Bukowski.
So Houston Texans, right, back-to-back playoffs, AFC South Division champs, all the good stuff, 4th seed in the AFC playoff picture. But there's a lot of people out there talk about, the Texans took a step back. Maybe C.J. Stroud took a step back. Maybe they're a little bit of fool's gold benefiting from being in a weak division. I don't know if you agree with that sentiment, but I do want to ask you, of all the playoff teams, right? Chargers are in there, Broncos are in there, Commanders are in there, and some of the usual suspects. Is there a fool's gold team that was in the playoffs this year that you don't think was actually a playoff? I always like to put it teams in the playoffs, but they're not necessarily a playoff team. Do you have a candidate?
Were the Packers in the playoffs?
The Packers were in the playoffs.
Oh, no. So we're going to talk about fool's gold. If you're going to talk about fool's gold, there's fool's gold for you. I mean, and I watched and I sat on the couch with my wife as one of those thug tears rolled down the side of her cheek as they lost again, as I told her that they would. But no, seriously, that was just a shot at Peter. I'm not a huge believer in the Chargers, and because I don't know what Justin Herbert is going to be. Like, 1 week he's the GOAT, he's going to replace Tom Brady, and then the next week you're looking and you're saying to yourself, like, when was he drafted again? I mean, I think that, even with the Harbaugh situation, with everything that they have going on over there, they have a very good short wide receiver who, overachieves a lot, but that's all they really have.
All right, so does Justin Herbert get a little bit of a pass when you think about all of those other quarterbacks that catch heat all the time?
Maybe, and his 2 playoff games were far from great. He's hurt a lot. But Wig, I often look at quarterbacks like stocks, and I didn't know we were going to talk about AFC South quarterbacks, but there's 4 quarterbacks I've been saying that I would buy right now at what I perceive to be their value on the stock market, and that's Herbert, Stroud, Lawrence, and albeit at a much cheaper price, Richardson. He's a penny stock at this point. But I think all those guys' stock will go up over the next 365 days.
I do too. I think Cohen is going to help here. I do believe that it's a put up or shut up moment where they blamed everything on Bobby Slowick over in Houston, and maybe with him gone, now it's like, okay, both of those guys. Okay, now what are you going to do?
Yeah,
I disagree. I disagree with Sarge here. I believe in the Chargers because I think where they're picking in this draft, I keep doing mock drafts, and Luther Burden III keeps falling right to him, and I'm just sitting there thinking like that's about all they need. And then there are a bunch of tight ends also that fall right in there in the second round, and a guy that I want you to watch out for is a defensive tackle out of Toledo. If he's sitting there in the second round, right?
Oh,
I
yeah.
saw him down at the Senior Bowl. I think his name is Alexander.
Alexander,
Yeah.
Love
If he is sitting there he's not as thought of as Mason Graham and not as thought of as Nolan from Mississippi State, but I think he can have a huge impact. Like I said, it's not just about the player; it's where they end up.
Combine's he's gonna blow the combine apart. And Wig, I kind of ignored your question before, but in terms of depth at the different draft spots, but there's a lot of tight ends. I mean, that's a really good spot. If they don't get Loveland or one of those dudes in the first round,
Arroyo.
Yeah. They'll get a tight end on day 2 or day 3 that'll help them. No question in my mind.
So what is the groups you're watching? I like the defensive tackles, and so does Daniel Jeremiah, who I really, really like. He loves the DTs. I like the wide receivers on day 2. I like the kid Beck. I like both. I like his running mate Williams at TCU. I like the fact that you can find a number 2 receiver even if you can't find a number 1.
Yeah, I like the day 2 wide receivers, kind of like the stock conversation for what they cost more than the day 1. It's a rare and awesome running back class. I mean, there's going to be undrafted free agents that stick in the league for 6 or 7 years. I mean, that's unbelievable to me. Tight ends is really, really strong. And I'm with you all across the D line, including edge, nose tackles, 3 techniques, 5 techniques, 3-4 outside linebacker types. I mean, at any shape or form of D lineman you want, top 3-4 rounds is going to be loaded. And everyone, of course, watch the Eagles model too. Those guys are going to go.
All right. So my 2 guys I'll give you that will blow the combine up: Savion Williams, wide receiver from TCU.
Yeah.
Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M. Watch that freakazoid when he walks in there and what happens when he goes through his drills. Everybody's going to go crazy, and I think he's going to end up in the top 7 or top 8 in the draft. All right, so next Friday, you'll be on travel. The Friday after that, I'll be laid up in the hospital getting some surgery done, so we'll see each other in about 3 weeks. But make sure y'all check out Locked On NFL every single day. Tyler Earl early in the morning with a double shot of espresso, and then I'll come in a barbershop and give it to you. We both use the local experts that know the NFL like no one else. Also, special shout out to David Harrison and the guys on the Locked On NFL Squad Show for all of our clips today. Make sure you tap into that also wherever you get your podcast. It's been real, Matt. We'll see you next time, and you guys take care. We'll see you next time here on Locked On NFL.